Congress. Another poll finding a similar 43% blaming Trump. And those bad vibes for the shutdown, well, they're spreading and contaminating Trump's overall approval because it's plummeted to just 39% with 56% disapproval. Now, that is bad. You hear these numbers a lot in politics, and it's easy for them to kind of like blend together at a certain point. But stop and think about it like this. The Democrats just won the midterms by a larger margin, 8%, than the national margin for other widely celebrated waves like the Republicans' 1994 revolution, which made Newt Gingrich Speaker. 8%. These new job approval polls show Trump underwater, though, by 17% tonight. That is way worse than that midterm stomping, which, as we just showed itself, was a historic margin. Donald Trump is dealing with this by not dealing with it. He offered several statements and tweets today that basically claimed the shutdown would help his reelection, lied about who is impacted by the shutdown, and we're not going to show you the tweet of the president lying about the shutdown because it's not true and doesn't really merit any further amplification here. But we will show you Donald Trump, this was just 2 days ago, claiming federal workers want him to shut down their place of work.
Well, I think they understand what's happening. They want border security. The people of this country want border security. Many of those workers have said to me and communicated, stay out until you get the funding for the wall. These federal workers want the wall.
A, it's not true. B, a more minor point, how are all these federal workers communicating directly with Donald Trump about their policy views? I mean, by what mechanism did he gather that or claim to gather that opinion? Now let's show you some facts about the public opinion, since that is part of any shutdown debate. Most Americans oppose Trump's shutdown, and just 35% of those surveyed in this Reuters poll say they backed including money for the wall in the first place in the bill. Only 25% took the more extreme bargaining position here that they would support both the wall and the mechanism of Donald Trump shutting down the entire federal government, quote, over the matter. Now, the lame duck Congress hasn't done much this week to move the ball in any which way. Mitch McConnell's Senate back in session today for a grand total of 4 minutes before adjourning, a symbolic number that was echoed by the lower chamber. Paul Ryan's House was in session for 2 minutes and 43 seconds. Now, one Democratic congressman tried to use those moments, literally moments, to force a vote on a bill to fund the government without getting into the wall debate. Now, the next time you'll see any of those politicians you just saw on your screen on the floor of their respective congressional houses, well, even to do nothing, the next time we even see that will be Monday. So government stays closed at least until then. And meanwhile, the expected incoming Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, making it clear she does not intend to blink, and she'll only send up spending bills when she takes charge that fund the government, but not Trump's wall. The reporting from Politico here is that House Democrats believe that move would put pressure on Mitch McConnell to follow suit, and they're confident their political leverage will only increase the longer the shutdown lasts, a notion that some GOP leaders agree with privately. How long will congressional Republicans back up Trump on a task that may continue to hurt their party? Well, a normal president would take any sustained pushback from his own party seriously on a fight that by definition cannot last forever because the government cannot stay closed forever. But I'll tell you this, because I like to keep it real with you guys. That normal premise is a thin foundation to work off of because, as we all know now, there is nothing normal about this. Now let's get into it. I got Jason Johnson here, politics editor at TheRoot.com, Mara Gay, member of the New York Times editorial board, and Jennifer Rubin, a conservative opinion writer at The Washington Post, all MSNBC contributors. Jennifer, where do we go from here?
There is no good solution for Donald Trump because, as you mentioned, Ari, Nancy Pelosi is going to send a clean continuing resolution back to the Senate. The Senate already passed one of these. So what do they say now? Well, we voted for it before, but we're not going to vote for it now. Perhaps they added a few $100 million, but not directly for the wall. That's a loss for Trump. Maybe someone gets really creative, follows Newt Gingrich's advice, which is to give him $5 billion, but get full legalization for the Dreamers. That'll really drive his base crazy. So there's only 3 or 4 ways out of this, and none of them are getting Trump what he wants. So he's looking for some deus ex machina to come down and save him, perhaps, or he's just thinking moment to moment, TV shot to TV shot, and really hasn't figured out how to get out of this. But there's no good end for this, and at some point, Republicans are going to throw up their hands and say, we need to get back to work.
You said at some point, and I guess that's a big part of this. There was a Republican on MSNBC just earlier this evening, Jason, still making the delay argument that, yeah, it looks like Mexico's not paying for it, and it looks like Donald Trump literally shut down the government in order to break his promise, because his promise was the U.S. wouldn't pay for the wall, and he's shut down the government now trying to make the U.S. pay for the wall. Viewers on MSNBC may note I've said that before. I will never stop reporting that fact. It's amazing to me that people talk about this and claim the president's trying to hold a campaign promise. He's trying to break a campaign promise. So for your analysis, Jason, take a look at connecting Jennifer's point of what Republicans may end up doing. Here is how they're holding the line tonight.
Why are we shutting down our government to get our taxpayer money to pay for the wall that Mexico is going to pay for?
Well, first off, this is not the final act in this drama, and the wall is the first step. The pay-for part may well come later. Right now, the issue is border security, and the president is exactly correct.
But let me ask you this: what you're saying is, you keep asking the American people to pay for something that the president promised them. I am not getting distracted. Get Mexico to pay for the wall if you want a wall so bad. It's very clear.
And they will. And they will.
So then go get them to do it.
That's the final step in this process.
I love this 12-step process that the Republicans are in, where apparently we pay for the wall, our tax money pays for the wall, and then somehow further down the line, Lopez Obrador decides to get the Mexican government to pay for a wall that they never wanted to pay for, and that the last two, including former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, use many, many words of profanity to say that Mexico will never pay for. Here's the issue. At the end of the day, the president of the United States has absolutely no leverage. The Senate really doesn't have any leverage. And once we hit next year, January 3rd, and the Democrats take over the House, they're just going to keep pushing the bill over and over. Eventually, the president of the United States is going to blink. Eventually, people are going to start getting angry. Eventually, FEMA's inability to process insurance forms. People are going to start getting concerned about tax season. The president is eventually just going to have to break on this issue. And here's the thing. A lot of political science has shown this. As much as President Trump wants to say this wall is very important, the wall has always been symbolic. His supporters are going to support him no matter what. And if the wall doesn't get built, they'll just say it's because of the evil liberal Democrats. So he kind of wins regardless, but he's not going to get anything built. And there's nobody in Washington, D.C. right here, right now that thinks that anything, even if it's just a bunch of spiky slats, are ever going to get put up on our border.
I can't agree anymore. I mean, I just think that ultimately the president just needs to say that he's won something. He needs to be able to turn to his base in good faith, whatever that means, with that weird relationship that he has with his base, and say, listen, I have a win. I'm a fighter. You know, he can make a win out of anything because he's a con artist. So that's really his job here. I think Mitch McConnell has a more serious role to play, which is finding out how to negotiate that without putting the American people through any more suffering.
Right, and that really goes back to what the Congress wants to put up with, as we were explaining in our lead. And Jennifer, I don't know how much Naughty by Nature you ever listened to. Do you remember them?
Yes.
But the big hit was OPP, other people's property. And it does seem that if the president, as the so-called master negotiator, got other people's property or cash to invest in the wall, it would be less of an issue. At what point does the Republican Party say, we're shining a giant spotlight on the ultimate failure of his ability to negotiate as commander-in-chief, President of the United States, to get other people's money to fund the wall?
Yeah, I see a whole bunch of ways in which there are going to be Republicans out there actually getting to Donald Trump's right, whether it's on this issue, whether it's people like Liz Cheney bashing the president for pulling troops out of Syria. He is not on a roll these days, and he's not on a roll with Republicans. And that's what's, I think, a bit different than what we saw for the past 2 years. He is now in the realm of making himself look more like the dreaded Barack Obama from the perspective of Republicans than the tough guy who is making America respected in the world. And even things like his support for Israel are now really under scrutiny by the religious right who love Israel for a whole variety of reasons. He's putting them in harm's way now by pulling troops out of Syria, putting Iran right on the doorstep of Israel. Whether it's that, whether it's the wall, whether it's the shutdown, whether it's donors' money in the markets, which is going up and down like a yo-yo, you do wonder just how much patience they're going to have with this guy when it's their money, when it's their interests that suddenly are at issue.
Yeah, and I think that goes to what's actually challenging about your job, about all of our jobs, is we report and analyze in this era, right? It's sort of like, how much mushier can oatmeal get? I mean, it's oatmeal. It's already mushy, right?
Right.
This is a very, very undisciplined, impulsive president. But do you see, at the New York Times, as you guys chart all this, do you see evidence of even more chaos and impulsiveness as the president goes into what will be a more difficult period for him? I mean, the days of united government are over. He has to win another election, which is a full 2 years away, to ever get back to where he was. Everything now, starting next week, is harder for him.
Oh, absolutely. My colleague Kara Swisher had a great column about the president's increasingly bad addiction to Twitter, and the basic concept being that he's essentially in a meltdown, and that as the walls are closing in with the Russia investigation, but also, of course, with the loss, the historic loss that Republicans suffered in the midterms, that he's essentially just freaking out. And, you know, caged animals can be very dangerous. So I'm actually a little bit concerned about what we might see as the president is, you know, not getting his way. And he's used to getting his way. I mean, before he was president, he suffered no consequences for his behavior in real estate. And now as president, up until the midterms, he's really not seen the consequences of his behavior. He's crossed every single line, ethical, moral line that the American people have put out for their presidents, and suffered no consequences until now. So what happens when he doesn't get his way? I mean, he's completely erratic when he wins. What's he going to be like when he loses? Do we really think he's a good loser? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Jason?
No. And this is the thing. This goes to the whole approval ratings. I mean, he's at 39%. He doesn't have the ability to sort of use the bully pulpit of the White House. I mean, the president is upset. He's under 50%, right? I mean, he can't do anything to convince members of his own party or anybody else that this is somebody that you have to listen to, that he's got some sort of influence one way or another. But here's where it becomes sort of an issue long term. Look, the Democrats are going to start running their primary around, February or March. They're going to start the silent primary. If the president cannot put more control over his own party, if he can't convince them that 39% can somehow translate into power for them and their bases, they're going to abandon him. I mean, if you look at his approval numbers, these are the numbers he had after Charlottesville. That means the president is as unpopular now as he was after a terrorist attack that killed a 32-year-old white woman in Virginia, and his own wife is at 43%. And usually the first lady is 10 to 12% higher than her husband. So he's not only bad for himself, he's bad for his party, he's even bad for the people he's married to.
Well, as they say, snap.
I think there's nothing really to say after that. I mean, that's brutal.
Nothing to Jason. Jason, Mara's decided we're ending the show. We may end all news coverage for the night or the week. There is nothing else to say. Look, in fairness to Melania Trump, and I think what you were saying may speak to this, it may be a lot more of his problems rubbing off on her than anything she is doing or not doing. She keeps a lighter schedule, but a woman that Joy Reid was just speaking about, former First Lady Michelle Obama, famously kept a lighter schedule than other First Ladies, focused in on a couple issues, and was much more beloved, as was the administration that she was a part of. Final thought, Jennifer?
Listen, we went through this year the funerals of George H.W. Bush, Barbara Bush, John McCain. These were giants. These were heroes. These were dedicated public servants. And I think even that, the comparison between what we've had in the past and what we have now is jarring, upsetting, and disillusioning for Americans.
Well, and it's disillusioning, and yet the larger point you're appealing to is something positive, which is not just partisan comparisons, not team red or blue. Right. The outpouring for George Bush Sr., whether one agreed or disagreed with some of his policies, but the respect for him as a person of public service and dignity, in contrast to what you're seeing today, is at least the silver lining, too, as the Grateful Dead would say, a touch of gray. Jennifer and Jason come back. Mara, we thank you for joining us here at the top of the show. Coming up, what I was just discussing with the panel, the Obama factor. Former President Obama, a huge boon to Democrats in the midterms, the numbers show, which, of course, helped that historic number of seats they gained. Now, heading into 2020, we're going to look at how his support could impact this crowded Democratic field that's widely expected. And also, conflicting answers about Trump's willingness to take any more questions from Bob Mueller. Why is Rudy Giuliani piping up about this today? We'll get into that tonight. Donald Trump's lawyer walking back comments he recently made suggesting that the president could agree to take more questions if it becomes necessary from special counsel Mueller. Today, though, in a new interview with Hill TV, Rudy Giuliani says Mueller's team won't get any more answers from Trump.
Do you expect that he's going to have to answer more questions in writing?
Well, I think I announced about 10 days ago over my dead body, and I'm not dead yet, so.
That answers that. As a
He's not answering any more questions from these people. Their outrageous activity. We did enough.
Talking tough, did enough. But Giuliani also said a day earlier something a little different, speaking to the Daily Beast, because, as a lawyer, he's constantly talking to reporters. He outlined how negotiations over whether Mueller could question the president actually remained open. We'll show it to you. He was asked if his understanding was that Mueller could still look to interview Trump, whether it's over the phone or in person, etc. And Giuliani says, well, it hasn't been formally closed yet. Trump's legal team submitted those written answers to Mueller's team last month. Now, those questions, according to all public accounts that we know about, Mueller's team hasn't confirmed it or anything, but they were allegedly linked to Russian interference. That was the focus. So things could change if Mueller subpoenas the president to talk about follow-up questions or other topics entirely. And Giuliani did one other thing today that lawyers don't usually do for their clients. He went from making a legal defense, which is totally kosher, you explain your client's position within the eyes of the law, to making a personal defense, literally offering a personal alibi for Trump's conduct during the end of the campaign.
I was with the president, the last 4 months of the campaign, virtually all day and into the night until he went back to his home. And there was no contact with WikiLeaks, none.
I'm joined by former federal prosecutor Joyce Vance and Jennifer Rubin back with me. Joyce, have you ever seen a lawyer make that kind of argument? Not only do I have a kind of a legal case for my client, but by the way, I spend all my time with him and I know he couldn't have done anything wrong.
A lawyer who makes those sorts of allegations, particularly a lawyer who doesn't appear to be actively engaged in lawyering with this particular client, really runs perilously close to becoming a fact witness that prosecutors might want to question. And that seems to be what Giuliani does here. I mean, yeah,
when you say fact witness, that's one of those things that lawyers talk about. It's like the way that Rod Rosenstein, who is Mueller's boss, ultimately might be called in to confirm or deny certain underlying facts, right? You're suggesting that Rudy opens himself up to that if his claim is, I watched everything and we never contacted WikiLeaks?
The lawyer-client privilege would protect legal communications between an attorney and his client, but this looks to be in an entirely different realm, this sort of vouching that Rudy's engaging in. Yeah, and so I think what you're saying in your normally careful and even nice way is this is mad sloppy, and Rudy was not retained as a lawyer in that period. He was a campaign surrogate, and so he sort of cracked the door. Now whether he gets in trouble for it or whether Mueller doesn't care about the 87th interview is an open question. Jennifer, we heard earlier today on MSNBC from Walter Dellinger
who was Solicitor General, who argued the Jones-Clinton case, which has some precedent that tends to cut against presidents in terms of their efforts to avoid interviews and prosecutors and such. And here's what he said to me earlier tonight about the idea that Mueller may ultimately subpoena Trump in 2019.
If the special counsel wants to know what Donald Trump's state of mind is, if he's considering perhaps even just naming him as an unindicted co-conspirator, he needs to interview the president. And I think he could easily take an expedited case on a grand jury subpoena of the president for his testimony up to the Supreme Court. They could hear that case. They could also hear a case involving the House's decision, if it comes to that, to subpoena the Mueller report.
Jennifer, do you think this is something that the White House is still worried would be on the table?
I think so. Listen, Rudy's not the real lawyer. Trump does have real lawyers. They're not very good, but he does have lawyers back there. And they are smart enough, even they, to understand that the law is not on their side. Between U.S. v. Nixon and the Paula Jones case, the judicial system's right to obtain evidence from a president, to put him under oath, to get information is on fairly solid ground. Now, could he take an appeal to the Supreme Court and with his two appointees perhaps get a different ruling? Perhaps, but he's not out of the woods yet. I disagree slightly with Walter on one thing, and that is Trump may actually have revealed a good deal of the state of his mind through his tweets, through his actions, and in those written questions. So Trump has a way of telling us exactly what he's thinking and what he's doing and why. So it may be that it's not as important as it would be with another witness to get Trump under oath. But frankly, I think if Mueller feels either from a sense of completeness or because he really is lacking some facts that he needs to put him under oath and take his testimony, I don't think he'd hesitate to do it at all.
Joyce, another story that's making waves today, which Michael Cohen was quick to publicly and unequivocally deny, is this reporting that maybe there were cell phone pings that would somehow link him back to Prague. He's denied it. Those reporters stand by their story, McClatchy. Several of them have been out discussing their story tonight. Take a listen to how one of the reporters described it on All In.
This is a part of a large, wide-ranging investigation, and this part could well be, or seems to us to be, still under scrutiny.
I see.
And therefore, if he didn't have it all nailed down, I mean, it's one thing to nail down certain details, which he obviously did with regard to the lies to Congress about the Trump Tower, where, you know, the Cohen acknowledged that he contact continued for 6 months after what he'd previously told Congress. Our understanding is that this part is, once again, still under scrutiny.
I see.
And that, you know, it's taking more time.
Joyce, do you buy that? Because the quick counter argument to that is Mueller knows what he's doing, and Cohen's at a different place now, having been credited with credible testimony.
Yeah, it's really hard to know what to make of this story with Cohen jumping quickly onto Twitter to deny it. I suppose it's possible that Michael Cohen's phone could have been in Prague and Michael Cohen could have been someplace else. He has this interesting drop line on his Twitter feed where he says, you know, I'm told that Prague is beautiful in the spring, or whatever it is that he says. Maybe whoever had his phone is the person who conveyed that to him. One has the feeling here that this is sort of a pregnant pause, that there's more to this story. Clearly, Mueller knows where this is headed, and we don't. And I think for now it has to be just a tantalizing, unfinished detail.
Joyce Vance and Jennifer Rubin, thanks to both of you. Up ahead, the new Congress will be seated in days, but it's almost certain that at least one seat from North Carolina, the 9th Congressional District, will be empty. There is more evidence of a pretty brazen vote tampering scheme piling up. We're going to have that story. Coming up for the first time in 17 years, Hillary Clinton, no longer the most admired woman in America. We'll tell you who next. Donald Trump famously watches a lot of the news, but for his sake, maybe it would be good if he doesn't watch this particular segment, because we can tell you the votes are in, and we now know the most admired Americans of the year. Here we are at the end of 2018, and topping the list are two very famous individuals who happen to be Democrats. Former First Lady Michelle Obama has been formally voted America's most admired woman. This is in Gallup's nonpartisan annual poll. Her husband, former President Barack Obama, America's most admired man, a title he's held for 11 consecutive years. So while president and now while post-president, not displaced by the current president. Now, both the former president and the first lady were active in the 2018 campaigns and the midterms, speaking at over a dozen rallies around the nation.
You can choose hope over fear. You can choose a bigger, more prosperous, more generous, kinder version of America.
What we need to do is bridge the gap between caring about that kind of stuff and actually doing something about it.
Michelle Obama's activities have stayed fairly civic, but Barack Obama is looking political. Vanity Fair reports that he's already been meeting with presidential hopefuls, including people like Beto O'Rourke, much to the chagrin, of course, of his former running mate, Joe Biden, who may run this time. We just don't know. Meanwhile, a former Obama advisor saying his position this time is if you're serious and you want to talk, I'll talk to you. As things unfold, he might say, let's all stay focused, but, and it's a big but, he's not going to pick a winner. I'm joined by Democratic strategist Aisha Moody Mills and Jason Johnson back with us. We'll get to those politics, but what does it tell you to see these people on the most admired list here at the end of this very, very divided 2018?
It tells us that, first of all, Americans are tired of being divided. I mean, the fact that Barack and Michelle both are aspirational, they're about hope, they're about change, they're about moving people to be their best selves, is really telling about like where we are right now as Americans and what the appetite is for the mess that's going on in politics. The other thing that I would add that's interesting, I appreciate your lead-in talking about how Michelle Obama has been really civic. This lady right now is literally selling out stadiums with her book tour. She has sold so many books right now. She's literally broken records. I don't want to undercount, and it's important to underscore the impact that she's actually going to have in mobilizing the Democratic base to come out and support whoever the candidate is, because I think that she's actually going to rally the troops in a more urgent way than perhaps the president.
Jason?
You can't get much bigger than this, okay? Michelle Obama is going to be taking her Becoming tour to London on April 14th of this year. She is taking the tour abroad, and the special guest might be Meghan Markle. Do you know how popular you have to be, not just in America, but on the entire planet, when the Duchess of Sussex is maybe your kind of opening act, right? Michelle Obama has always run, 5 to 10 points ahead of Barack Obama, but this Becoming book has turned her into a cultural phenomenon, the likes of which we haven't seen since Oprah probably 20 to 25 years ago. And I think that her very existence had always been political, as the first African-American first lady, as a woman who had her own career, as a woman who dared to actually occasionally be critical and talk about her husband in humanizing ways. So she is going to be a dynamic force. Look, if I was running for office in 2020, which I obviously am not, but if I was, after I talk to Barack, I would talk to Michelle, because in all honesty, she's going to be the person that you need on the ground in South Carolina. She's going to person you're going to need on the ground in Georgia if you're going to be competitive in 2020 as much as Barack.
Well, you're saying she might be going to the UK with Meghan Markle. As you know, Jason, no greater authority on doing what you want than the rapper Future said.
Yes.
You do what you want when you poppin'.
That's.
Let's not forget who's also number 3 on this list, who's number 2 right behind Michelle Obama, is Oprah Winfrey, right? Yes. So we also have 2 black women who are at the top of that list. Again, mobilizing women to come out and to vote. I think that that's going to be huge because they're both rock stars.
So let's get into it a little bit, since you bring that up.
Yeah.
We can get into it, right?
Yeah.
How do you deal with America's clear excitement about some black women, Oprah and Michelle, while America also still struggles with putting women in positions of power? In other words, would America love Oprah as much if she said, I want to be president?
Well, the 2018 midterm showed us that America actually does love women. We see a record number of women coming into Congress right now, and a record number of women of color. So I think all those tides are changing. And I also have to add the fact that Donald Trump only gets 9% on this list. Yes, it makes him number 2, but it's only 9%. So when we're talking about
Aisha, you're not in a Trump.
Generally,
you're not in a Trump segment.
Generally,
we talked about Trump earlier.
We are talking about America generally.
Why
right?
are you trying to bring Trump into to the Obama Oprah segment.
Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey are the majority of the love and the passion of all Americans. The three of them, that's all we need to move the needle, period.
I mean, look, everyone understands at home. We are all independent here, so everyone could say anything. I'm never going to stop you, but Jason, this was an Obama-Oprah segment, and now we got the T-Man in here.
For a long time, and everybody's going to be saying this until someone becomes more popular than Barack Obama, our president is black and probably will be, as the rapper said, for probably a good 8 to 10 years. I mean, the outgoing president, if you leave relatively popular, you're going to stay that popular. What I do think is this, though. We can't forget that going into 2020, whether it's Ocasio-Cortez, whether it's Stacey Abrams in Georgia, there are going to be other popular black women. Remember, she's not on the Gallup list, but Stacey Abrams was the most Google politician in the midterms of 2018. So there are plenty of powerful African-American men and women who are going to be the key decision makers in 2020. And as unhappy as Joe Biden may happen to be at this point, because Barack hasn't had a conversation with him, look, he picked the wrong side in Georgia, too. So I think there's a lot of people who are going to be on that short list of people that the president may sort of let it leak that he had a conversation with. Joe Biden's not going to be one of those people because he can't win.
Kamala Harris, just saying.
I don't think she can win either, but we'll see.
Why don't you think she can win? This is a feisty segment. Thought we were just talking about who's admired, and now it's just all over the place. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I think that the criminal justice background of Senator Harris from the state of California is going to present some real problems when she gets to the primary. I think that the idea that you have prison labor that are fighting the wildfires out there, these are all things that occurred during the time when she was AG. It doesn't mean that the things that she's done in the Senate haven't been great. It doesn't mean that she hasn't been very active in criminal justice since she's got to the Senate. But I think in a Democratic primary where what you did at the state level is going to matter, I think she's going to have a lot of difficulty. And if she doesn't end up winning one of the first 3 primaries, by the time she gets to South Carolina, she'll be done by Super Tuesday.
Perhaps.
I know the K-Hive is going to come after me, but...
They are. And so here's the thing. Even if she doesn't win, I think that she's going to have a huge factor in bringing people out. At the end of the day, 2020 is going to be about the mobilization of the base. And all the people that we're talking about, and we're talking about the Obamas, we're talking about Kamala Harris, those are the people who are really inspiring, the people who show up and push whoever the candidate is over the edge. So we can't discount her because her power is going to matter. And the fact that she's in that field is absolutely going to matter.
Also, Jason, we're writing down your prediction because pundit predictions about these races are they're usually not right. So we'll run it. We'll run it back for you someday. Jason, Aisha, my thanks to both of you. Up next, there's actually breaking news in another midterm story. This is the outstanding race in North Carolina's 9th congressional district. But first, Christmas may be over, but we want to tell you on behalf of Lawrence, you can still donate to the Kind Fund. That's Kids in Need of Desk, a partnership that Lawrence created with MSNBC and UNICEF to provide desks to schools in Malawi that have never had desks and scholarships for girls and young women to attend high school in Malawi, where public high school is not free, and the graduation rate there for young girls is much lower than it is for boys. You can contribute any amount at lastworddesk.msnbc.com. That's lastworddesk.msnbc.com. You can also make donations in honor of friends and family, and UNICEF will send them an acknowledgement of your gift. Anything you can do to contribute does make a difference for these people. Now, we will be right back. 1 week from today, the winners of the 2018 midterm elections will formally take their seats in the new 116th Congress. But get this, for the first time in, we checked, 34 years, Congress will enter its next session with one election still outstanding, because the race you may have heard about in North Carolina's 9th District continues to be plagued by what are now quite clearly credible allegations of election rigging that were made on behalf of the GOP candidate Mark Harris. An operative named McCrae Dowless, who worked for the Harris campaign and was hired at the direction of Harris himself, accused of having paid people to collect absentee ballots from voters and bring them to him. Now, sworn affidavits claim that he told people in the community that they basically destroyed whatever would have been potential ballots voting for Democrats. Now, others have claimed that this team, call it a sort of Republican fraud team, was filling out ballots on behalf of voters. Now, Dallas's lawyers still claim, we want to report for you, they say he did nothing illegal whatsoever. Now, the North Carolina Board of Elections refused to certify these election results because Harris won by just 905 votes. And under state law, they could soon decide to hold a whole new election for this seat. Now, the fight for that election moves into the state legislature, and there's a bill passed by the Republican-controlled North Carolina House and Senate mandating that should the Elections Board decide to hold a new congressional election, they would also have to hold a new primary as well. And then it includes a provision that would make future boards of election investigations secret. A lot of people don't like the way this smells. Democrat Governor Roy Cooper vetoing the bill, saying it would basically, quote, protect politicians who commit fraud. Now, the Republican-controlled legislature then overrode that veto today. So this is all unfolding before our eyes in what would otherwise be a sleepy holiday week. And tonight, there is now brand new breaking news on this story that opens up a new possibility. Could Speaker Pelosi ultimately decide what happens to this House seat? Well, we have the latest from a North Carolina elections law expert on all of this straight ahead. 1 week after the midterm elections, North Carolina congressional candidate Mark Harris tweeted this picture of himself at freshman orientation with other newly elected members of Congress, the freshman class. But now, Mr. Harris may find himself in Washington next year, not as a member of Congress, but, well, frankly, the subject of a looming investigation into possible election fraud. As promised, I'm joined now by phone by Jerry Cohen, a former special counsel for the North Carolina General Assembly and an expert on election law in the state. Jason Johnson will join me in a moment. But let me start with you, Jerry Cohen. What is going on in North Carolina? What is new in light of this action by the legislature?
Well, it's a whole labyrinth that runs back 2 years when the legislature tried to strip powers from incoming Democratic Governor Roy Cooper. He won 2 or 3 times in the state Supreme Court, and that was being resolved today with a new structure that restored powers to the governor effective January 31st. We had an ongoing investigation that a 3-judge court, a state court, had been supervising and extending its length repeatedly. And today, about 15 minutes after the legislature adjourned, it decided it wasn't extending its stay any longer, and the current state board of elections will expire tomorrow at noon, which may leave a 34-day hiatus while we try to resolve everything.
Which then in plain English means what? A month goes by, and then eventually it's most likely that the House Democrats in Washington will have the final say?
Well, there'll be 34 days potentially without a state board of elections. Thus, the January 11th hearing might not happen. It might leave the House to conduct its own investigation next week and not seat anyone. But there's a lot of research going on about other laws that might let the governor appoint the board under like an 1869 statute that deals with situations where there's offices and no provision for their appointment. So people are busy scratching their heads today, but everything was this court order 15 minutes after adjournment of the legislature for the year took everyone by total surprise.
I think our viewers are pretty familiar with some of the battles that have been waged in other states where there have been these so-called power grabs, Wisconsin, et cetera. Is this, in your view, the analysis that you've done, is this a similar power grab where basically you have otherwise duly authorized body dissolved because the legislature doesn't like what they were up to?
Well, this is, the 2016 action right after the election was very similar to what went on in Wisconsin and Michigan this year. But the difference here, and I hate to cast it in a partisan tint, but our state Supreme Court was 4-3 Democratic as the result of the 2016 election, a reversal. And now, starting next Wednesday, will be 5-2 Democratic because the Democrats have been carrying statewide elections. So our court struck down those power grabs 2 or 3 times in state court over the last 2 years. So it's put this back in balance.
But I mean, I guess what I'm asking you is there any good reason for the elections board to be, as you put it, on a month hiatus or eliminated?
No, the court complained, and the 3-judge court order complained that the state board, by delaying its hearing till January 11th from the previous December 28th, was delaying any certification or resolution of the 9th District election. But by putting in a 34-day hiatus, it's delaying it even more unless the U.S. House steps in perhaps on Wednesday and takes over the investigation.
Jerry Cohen has been all over this, and as you said, folks are scratching their heads who study this for a living in North Carolina, let alone the rest of us who are wondering if it's going to affect the actual balance of power in the House, as well as, of course, the larger issues of whether these votes are being properly counted. You've been a great help to us tonight, so thank you, Jerry. I want to bring back in, as promised, Jason Johnson. You and I have the easy part because Jerry did the hard part, and it is certainly complex. But at bottom, what do you see happening here? And if it does look like a kind of a standstill with a lot of recriminating, fights back and forth inside the state, what do you see Pelosi and the House Democrats doing?
Ari, this is the stuff that I love. My doctorate's out of Chapel Hill, so I was steeped in North Carolina politics for my entire process. What this basically boils down to is this. There's two things that can happen. Either we wait 34 days, Governor Cooper of North Carolina puts a brand new elections committee together. They call for a new election, and you end up probably with McCready, the Democrat ends up winning, and he ends up getting seated in the Congress sometime over the summer. That could happen if people are willing to wait that long. Or Nancy Pelosi next Wednesday, when she gets into office, if this is something that she cares about on her agenda, could say, look, we have reason to believe that this was a fraudulent election. We will not seat anybody that you have from North Carolina's 9th District unless we get to conduct an investigation as the House, and then we may suggest that you have to have another election. So one way or another, I think we're going to have another election. It could come from Congress, or it could end up coming from the governor of North Carolina.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating one, given that it is our one outstanding seat out there. Jason Johnson, thanks for riding along tonight. And tonight's last word is next. We're about to show you something pretty unusual here in New York. LaGuardia Airport right now is only operating on a partial basis because of a transformer explosion at a power plant in Queens, which lit up the sky an eerie and bright blue tonight. People are talking about what you see right here. A New York City-based energy company, Con Ed, saying that basically what happened here to create this spectacle was a couple of transformers tripped offline, sparking a fire, and that explosion lit the sky basically so brightly that it kind of looks, as you can see, like it's daytime, or at least a sort of a blue daytime, in several neighborhoods like Astoria and Woodside near Queens. Now, smoke arose from the source of the blue light, visible from as far away as Manhattan. And get this, the New York Police Department officially saying not only were there no injuries, but they add, with a tweet that, contrary to some people's fears, aliens, or at least alien emojis, have not landed in the Bronx. We thought that was a last word you could use tonight. I am Ari Melber filling in. You can always catch me on The Beat at 6 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow I'll be joined by some former federal prosecutors as well.